Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Pod SaaS. Today we have a special guest. The president of Multiplier is here. I'm going to turn it over to him. He can introduce himself, tell us a little bit more about what Multiplier is and what they do, and then we'll jump right into it.
No, thank you so much, Krish. Very much a pleasure to be here today with you. As a very quick overview, Multiplier is a global compliance platform that helps companies employ people in different jurisdictions where they don't have their own legal entity. I can completely understand that it's a mouthful to explain, but what we are basically solving for is, allowing, SMEs, mid-markets and larger companies to get access to talent across the world. So, companies typically find their own talent. We come along, we handle the stuff that is really painful and difficult to do, which is, your payroll, your payments, your compliance in different jurisdictions. We currently support organizations in more than 150 countries. It is an extremely difficult thing to execute on, but we are here to make it better and easier and provide significant value for our stakeholders.
Of course. Would love to, I have a ton of questions around that because obviously where remote work is and where global teams are now, it's a lot different given, I think we hit this accelerator through the pandemic and the whole nine. So obviously it's very top of mind. But before we do that, we'd love to get to know a little bit more about you, your journey. I know you've worked at some, really big like headhunter firms in the past and been involved in talent acquisition for, best part of a decade. And so what's your background? How did you land in that world before Multiplier?
Absolutely. So, a little bit of a background on myself. So, I'm just a simple chap from Singapore, born and raised over there, over multiple generations. Spent a few years in Australia doing my undergrad, and then I moved to UK and then became a chartered accountant with KPMG in London. Then, in 2012, moved back to Singapore with my wife and then decided to have, kids and went into the world of, recruitment and talent acquisition and sales with Robert Walters. And then subsequently, it's an executive search consultant with Korn, Ferry, one of the bigger brands. It was during that time that, the other two co-founders, Sagar and Vamsi, they approached me and say, hey, we need someone with your skill sets to help us build this out. And I had a open conversation with my wife. I said, darling, I don't know how long I won't be paid, but it sounds interesting. Shall we do it? And she's like, okay, go for it. And that was approximately 3.5 years ago. And today we've grown strength to strength. I would not say that any day is easy, but the organization has really changed extremely dramatically, internally, and we are adding a lot of value to the ecosystem.
Very cool. So I'm curious, this is something that always like piques my interest, I think from a founder perspective, is how do you go from that consistent paycheck, obviously having a conversation with your wife, then like to making the decision of, I don't know how long we're not going to get paid, we got to bootstrap this thing, we got to like build it out or get to some sort of like market validation, and that takes time, right? And you never know how long it's actually going to take. How do you make that decision? What was so compelling about what the other two co-founders brought to you that you thought was like, this is something I should take a risk on?
I think the major thing is that as we were starting, I was familiar with the problem statement from an enterprise perspective. So I kind of knew that there was a solution. And I also, while at Korn Ferry, I'd seen the problem statement at place, where we were recruiting for a number of roles for an organization from Norway. And when it came to distributing employment contracts, the company said, hold on, we need another 6 months to get this sorted. And I was like, what is the problem statement?
Yeah.
So I saw it in action. We spent a few days Googling for solutions and realized that there wasn't much of a solution. And then, it was, I think, maybe a year later that Sagar and Vamsi reached out and then shared. And I was like, hey, I know this problem. It can be solved. And so, it's something that it was not too difficult to step into because I could gauge shall I say, the gravity of the problem or the volume of the problem amongst businesses out in Asia Pacific alone.
Yep. Interesting. So I mean, when you say 6 months, as that was like the problem statement, about 3.5, 4 years ago, can you walk us through how you were handling this problem before Multiplier? And what was that process like? And then how did you realize that you could streamline it?
So the major challenge is that, for any business to engage with an individual in a foreign market, they would have to set up their own legal entity. You have to register a business and to be honest with you, it's like a marriage that nobody wants to have.
Yeah,
Yeah. You have to register an entity, then you have to, make the necessary registration with the relevant statutory authorities. And at the same time, you'll have to open a bank account. Now, phase one, opening an entity is painful. Typically it takes 2 to 6 months. It's a ridiculous amount of paperwork. Every country's systems are extremely legacy. You know, and I'm sure everybody knows that there's an annual index that is released called the ease of doing business. Typically you see Singapore, Hong Kong, UK. Yeah, those are only like 5 to 10 countries that have made it easy. The rest are really difficult. So that is a problem statement. Then the second portion is, we have to open up bank accounts. Now, hey, banks are not really as international as it's made it out to be.
yeah,
Yeah. So that is another 3 to 6 months process. And now, only after you have completed these two activities can you legally engage with a person in a foreign jurisdiction.
yeah,
And that is a massive problem simply because the moment you have set up a legal entity, you are fundamentally tied to that country, which means whether you like it or not, you have to file your taxes annually. You may need to get audits done annually. All of that stuff that these businesses do not need and want because they fundamentally have very little business value.
sure. Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. And then so when we're talking about going through this process, right? Like I think a lot of startups are probably familiar with, hiring from like Upwork or like Fiverr and doing these things where it's like more gig type work. We're talking about a very different model, right? In the sense that you want to source more like executive or senior level talent from different countries, maybe still at a discount than what you would maybe pay in the States, but this is the kind of companies that you guys are considering as customers, right? As people that utilize your service. So that being said, I mean, have you seen what is with the pandemic and with the change to more remote teams and the acceptance of like global teams? What have you seen trend wise from companies, at least stateside or even internationally, around how
Mhm.
they're thinking about hiring those more senior executives um, from a global perspective? And what's that trend look like?
Absolutely, Chris. So the key takeaway is that it's not so much executives at a senior level, it's really your junior individual contributor roles.
Uh,
So, we see the biggest demand for talent in the Philippines for
yeah,
companies based in the United States.
okay.
Simply because, the average wage over there is under 1,005 USD per month.
Wow.
Now, and most organizations want people to just be full-time staff. And it's very different from the gig industry that, Upwork and Fiverr, works with. Um, a lot of roles, maybe you just need somebody for 2 to 5 hours or 10 hours a week. That is fine.
Sure.
Most businesses just want, a full-time accountant working with them and want to defray some of their wage costs. And that is the best way to think about this. And, we support more than 1,000 businesses in the United States alone. And the number one demand market seems to be Philippines for a lot of your customer support, accounting, HR roles. Then you have India providing a lot of support for accounting, marketing, and engineering roles. And then, lo and behold, you have Canada.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Supports across all business units because, if somebody is working, a New York-based business is hiring someone in Utah, it makes no difference if the person is sitting in Toronto.
Yep.
So, and if you also note that, Canadian wages are already like 30% less than the United States wages.
Right.
And it's got nothing to do with the quality of talent. It's just a function of the cost of living in all of these countries.
Yep. Yep. Makes sense. Um, and so I mean, have you seen as you guys have gone to, still relatively young, but in that go-to-market phase, like, have you seen the adoption of that narrative become easier in the past, like 1 to 2 years, or has it still been very similar in the sense that you've kind of seen this happen, this transition happen, post-pandemic, and then people, were really accepting of it, but like, has there been any incline in terms of like adoptability of this process?
So, no, thanks for highlighting that. So the pandemic definitely played a very positive role and it had a very positive impact on our business because it allowed businesses to recognize that, hey, whether a person works from home or in the office, they can be equally productive. So that is not the shall I say, the foundational element of where multiplier comes in.
Yep.
We come in when companies need to transcend borders, which is, hey, the United States market is as such where your average wage for a software engineer is 150,000 USD. Not every business can afford that.
Mhm.
And now you as a business owner, you may need to access a Canadian software engineer, and that's already 30% lower. Or you go to India, which is about 70% less than the United States wage. And it's mainly because the cost of living in the US is, significantly above the other countries. So
Yep.
but definitely repeating that, COVID played a part in allowing people to think that, hey, this is possible. And now we are just seeing the continued growth in this segment simply because there's always going to be a talent shortage that you see by how wages have changed over the last 10 years. As long as wages are going up, it
Yeah.
will show you that there's a shortage of talent. But the challenge is that as wages go up, cost of living in those markets also go up.
Yep.
Typical countries such as the United States, UK, Australia, etc., use and rely on migration as a mechanism to support growth in the market. Now, we are also alleviating a lot of pressure from that because US now does not need to import so much talent because we have set up a mechanism to
Yep.
allow businesses to get access to labor across the world.
Interesting. And in terms of like, where do you foresee that? I mean, we're now like diving into the macroeconomic environment, but like, do you foresee that continue to trend upwards in terms of that accessibility to that mechanism in the United States specifically, or those other kind of countries that you spoke about with higher wages, higher cost of living, like Australia and UK, to just to continue to bring that, becoming, I guess, more of like best practice for an organization to start growing their team that way versus looking domestically.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the key takeaway is that over the last 40 to 50 years, all of your Fortune 500 organizations, your Visa, your MasterCard, your Googles, and your Microsofts, they have had access to offshore talent.
Yep.
Who does not have an office in India today, or Philippines, or Mexico? But what has been hampering the growth of a lot of SMEs and mid-markets is that they don't have the access to the same resources, their legal teams, their accounting teams, etc., to say, hey, I want to get access to this. So that is where our solution comes in, because now we have made global talent accessible to all. Whether you're a super small business, you're a F&B joint and you just want one accountant in Honduras, or you're a larger company and you want a sales director in Japan,
Yep.
we can cater to all. And that's the key difference that we are bringing to the market today.
Got it. From Multiplier's perspective, with how you guys run internally, do you guys do the same thing? Do you use your own product?
Of course, of course. So, our 450 staff sit across 60 countries.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, if anybody wants to know about talent, we actually know it ourselves.
Sure.
We've had to grow, we've had to grow for multiple reasons. Number one, we needed local knowledge and support across all countries.
Yep.
And number two, we were also scaling out our GTM function. So we ended up building our team in Asia Pacific, then we built out in Europe, then in US, such that we were 24/7 business.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. 400 some employees now. I mean, that globally, that's really fast in the past, like for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, can you walk us through a little bit more around those different phases of growth, or from ideation to having a product, and then to raising capital, and what would those steps look like for you to get to this phase now, and how fast has it been in terms of like in some of these stages? Was it from the get-go that you guys kind of got to this place, or was it like, what were the, walk us through the steps and, potentially some of the nightmares of scaling up?
No, there's no easy day
Yeah.
over here.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, every day we are faced with a new challenge, either from a GTM perspective or from an operational perspective.
Yeah.
Simply because from an operational perspective, the two topics that we cover, being global payroll and global payments, they've not necessarily been done well.
Yeah.
Or if I would say not even done. You talk about a global bank like Citigroup, you know, they have a footprint in about 50 markets. Hey, that's not global enough. We need coverage in 150 countries. Now, what do you do? So we have to basically do a lot more work to resolve global payments as a topic, and then global payroll as a topic. So two different topics that, the world has not I mean, very few other businesses are investing in.
Yeah.
There are so many other sexier topics like AI and
Sure.
machine learning, right? For organizations. So very few organizations are putting a lot of money here. So that's where, we come in. So operational challenges keep happening. And then, we still have to continuously work, in our engineering team of about 150 of them are just solving problems on the daily.
Mm.
Then when it comes to GTM, it's separate can of worms. We started off in Singapore. We have no brand. We still, in fact, have very little brand awareness, I would say. So developing the first 100 customers, getting the first $2-3 million of revenue, of course, comes with a lot of begging, a lot of explaining. But it's really made easier because there was pain in the market that we are able to solve for. If there was no pain in the market, then there's nobody buying our solution. So building that was I mean, getting the first 100 customers, is most critical. The speed at which we got that was I would say lucky. At the same time, then how do you scale out sales teams from Asia Pacific to Europe and to US and ensure people are, well onboarded, have their enablement in place and are set up for success. So those are, I would say, continuous challenges that we are solving for. We're still far from resolving them. And then, as we grow and scale, then of course, building up the tools and our internal infrastructure to support hiring more reps is also another challenge, because we always have to continuously balance, rep productivity and rep success. You don't want to work people to the ground, and you want people to be paid well. At the same time, we also need to ensure that we don't overhire, otherwise we're just burning too much money. It's a very, very I would say fine balance that is continuously trying to juggle.
I mean, you opened up a can of worms in that too, right? I mean, I feel like, because I think for every company, that's the that's one of the biggest, I think, growing pains, is like figuring out how to grow, right, efficiently. Um, you walk through a lot of like these different milestones, for, let's just kind of like get a little bit more granular, but getting to this first 100 customers, how long did that take? And was it like founder-led sales predominantly? And then, I mean, then how do you figure out at which point do you hire sales reps and build out a sales team? And was it from the very beginning, day one, figuring out the process, and how do you get to process and all that?
Very, very, I still don't know, to be honest. I've been lying if I said I made very conscious decisions based on like specific math.
Sure.
Uh, it was really a function of, we hired, it was really very much founder-led sales for say the first 100 customers.
Okay.
Uh, and it's about hiring BDRs first to say, hey, can you get me some meetings? Then
So
it
how
became a
long?
case. So getting to me and my other co-founders handling too much meetings was maybe about 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
Okay.
when we was like, oh crap, there's so much of interest. Oh, we need another AE, So
Yeah.
then we hired our first AE, and then very soon we had to hire two more AEs, and then we're like, oh, this is too much. I need to hire support, because there were, we had already like 50, 60 customers signed up, and there were operational challenges with respect to payroll, payments, queries, stuff like that. Oh, okay, we need to hire success and support. And so we started building that out. So it took, I would say, maybe a year to get to about 100 odd customers, paying customers.
Okay.
Uh,
That's still fairly fast. So in my mind, I work with a lot of different startups, and I think like, there's companies that have been at it for 6 or 7 years that don't have 100 customers. So market indicated very quickly, it feels like that you guys had something there in terms of like the
Yeah,
promise.
and also finding your ICP is the most critical element, right? How
Yep,
do we get about finding the people who have the most pain, who
yep,
have the biggest propensity to buy? Two
yep,
major key points, right? Because in our the first month and a half, like everybody says sell to startups is the best and easiest. Uh, Truth be told, we stopped. I tried and I stopped because I
yep,
was like, "Hey, people don't really need this solution. Maybe I
yep,
try." So I started going to SMEs, mid-markets, enterprises, tried from Australia, Singapore, companies based in Australia, Singapore, UK, and US.
uh-huh,
So within the first year, what was interesting is as a function of testing the market and testing market messaging and all of that, we ended up closing businesses that were startups, SMEs, mid-markets, and enterprises across professional services, technology, oil and gas, and even industrial manufacturing. So with about 15 to 18 months of data, we're like, oh crap, all right, the TAM is really this big. Now what do we do next? We have to start limiting and start
yep,
focusing. And
yep,
and that's really where we are trying to spend most of our efforts, because you don't want to get too distracted because
yep,
everybody's got a fanciful idea all the time. You just want to keep focusing and going deeper and deeper into the market that you think you have the best chance, because at the end of the day, it's great to knock on doors, but if those people don't have money to pay, then
yep,
you want to waste your time.
yeah.
So that was very important, I would say, in the initial 2 years.
Yeah, makes sense. Totally makes sense. So, I mean, what ended up being that ICP, and what were the variables that you guys used to drill down into that? Obviously, I think that comes from operational objectives in terms of whether you're looking for, the highest ACVs or quickest sales cycles or whatever. So curious as to what you ended up landing on.
I mean, what we want is also not a function of what the market provides,
Yeah,
because there's also a lot of marketing demand for our solution with organic and paid. We don't get to choose the customers as much as people choosing us. So, we still facilitate it and ensure that, those turn out to be a profitable endeavor. Then in terms of where we are specifically focusing on, it's really very much, organizations that have a multi-country thinking. Those newer age companies are starting off, in the last 5 years going, hey, I know I need engineers in India. And it has become a lot easier for organizations to do that simply because of the amount of global mobility that exists. It's not difficult for a Vietnamese CTO in Australia to immediately, day one on his job, say, I need to build a tech team in Vietnam.
yeah,
And that also facilitates the solution very well. So I mean, basically we keep very close track of all the NRRs, the NRR data, your ACV data, and sales cycle data, to ensure that we are able to maximize for growth.
got it. And given how fast you guys have grown and how quickly you started to have to hire, you know, uh, how do you guys think about, culture and, um, yeah, like company culture, and how do you, I mean, it's so fast. So like, how do you think about that? And, what would you say is actually like the culture that you guys have fostered now?
Um, Culture is very difficult to define in
Yeah,
a company that is like almost entirely remotely operating.
yeah, yeah,
Then Slack forms the culture. You
yeah.
know,
Interesting.
how people communicate with each other, how demanding people are, how polite people are. So, we make extra efforts, we to organize, monthly town halls, just to ensure that everyone has enough time interacting with each other and sees everyone together in the same place. We also actually promote people calling each other to resolve topics rather than, typing and
Yeah,
messaging away in Slack, because that again creates, a lot of unnecessary friction.
yeah,
And as things progress, we are seeing, different departments taking on different cultures depending on how the department leaders are,
mm,
um, which has pros and cons, but at the same time is becomes very undefined. So we as a business always talk about a few important things, which is telling people, we want to ensure that people remain humble, people are concise in their communication, and always be aware that you don't really know what that person is going through at that point. So don't be rude. and ensuring that, people just treat each other in the most emotional and transparent manner.
Yeah, makes sense. A couple of questions that came out of when you're explaining that is, one, how important is culture, especially in like a global environment, a global teams environment, um, and is it as critical? And I guess like two was just going to be on the topic of, when you do hire, like are there certain like red flags or that you're looking for as part of a hiring process nowadays, or or are there things that you guys asked that are unique questions as part of the interview process to really kind of, I think a lot of like hiring tends to come from finding personality fits, to in addition to obviously being able to execute on the work, but I think like it's much more difficult to find the personality fit than it is to find somebody who can execute on work. So curious, especially from like that global teams perspective, around those two topics.
I would be really honest with you. I think most people in the market are still scratching their head, and
Yeah,
I don't know what is the best way forward. So at least we mitigate the risk by, ensuring that people interview well. They don't sound like assholes, not too arrogant. That much at the basic level we can try to manage.
yeah,
Uh, but at the same time, it's we hire so much, and people also leave
yeah,
so often because they were just not a good fit. So we are also forever learning about that specific point.
yeah,
We
makes sense.
cannot have got it right at all.
Um, and then I guess like kind of alluding back to that first point of like company culture, do you feel like that's an important, priority? Maybe not now, but like maybe in the future? Or is it not even a priority as you scale like global teams and it's not as critical, as like it has historically been for like tech companies that, are growing their entire like engineering team, in office, right? Like it's two different, I think two different worlds, two different perspectives, not necessarily like one's right or wrong. I've seen companies be highly successful in both. So just curious to your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely something that we spend time wondering about, because there's always that what's it called, that fine balance of trying to manage. Do you want people to be extremely aggressive, or do you want people to be sensible and polite in their dealings and interactions? And there is definitely a path towards both, where revenue and culture, and being cognizant of both scenarios. But it comes at a point when you know that the team that you have is the winning team, and you are willing to go out and bet for others. So hiring well at the start is really important. But at the same time, as organizations, because of the fast growth, things change every year, every 18 months. A new problem comes around and a new org chart needs to be required. So keeping everybody very well informed of, changes is also very critical, so that, people don't feel that, oh, this is no longer the company I joined 12 months ago.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, do you guys now with such a large team, do you guys have like an HR person or a talent acquisition person in each country? And kind of or is it just one, is it a team that's doing all the hiring across the board? Or how do you, I guess, like how do you handle the different cultures of being international, right? And because personality types and culturally can impact, how that behavior is, and how do you think about that?
So our TA team has always been global.
Okay.
We had a TA person in Singapore, Dubai, UK, India, and the US. So we've had people in market
Yep.
uh, since I would say the last 2.5 years, and we will continuously maintain that kind of a footprint from a talent acquisition perspective, just so that people are happy to say, "Hey, I've been working at Multiplier for the last 18 months, 2 years. It's cool." And that often helps, and that also helps us to bridge that sort of country knowledge and
Yep.
gap. So TA is definitely that. We also have a head of HR, who recently joined us from a very large multinational, and he's putting in place very lovely mechanisms to, build more glue within the team, ensure that we travel as business leaders to meet various teams, and just so that we spend time together, because spending time together is one of the most critical things in a remote organization.
Yep. Yeah. Um, and we don't want to take up too much time, so just the last few more questions here. But as you're talking about, yeah, bridging that gap of like the interpersonal physical space with teams, how do you do that with 450, plus team members? How does the founding team think about that? How do you allocate time towards it? I think obviously as you grow too, like the problem that you are solving is a lot different, especially when you start removing yourself from the actual execution part of it. A lot of it is more high level, kind of like thought process and figuring out strategies and from
Mm.
that way. But like, how are you guys prioritizing the in-person
Uh,
with
Absolutely. So we've always had an office in Singapore
okay,
since.
okay,
Well, all three of us co-founders, our CTO, our head of sales, we always were together. And that allowed us to iterate extremely quickly. And as we are growing, we are also then looking to build up specific hubs, in one in Bangalore, in Manhattan, where I'm at. I've also just set up an office just to allow people to come to places where we can congregate ever so often. It just becomes so much easier.
yeah,
But at this point in time, it's still too early to say, what is the success of that, and it's still a little bit iterative.
got it. Um, and as we kind of wrap things up here, just would, you know, having gone from being one of three co-founders and coming up and building this out with even though they came to you with the idea of it, but like building out from the ground level to getting to where you are now, right? And maybe this is the spin on this would be from a talent acquisition perspective, but any tidbits that you would want to share with any like entrepreneurs, founders, or any other companies that are in a similar stage as you guys in terms of like fast growing that pitfalls to look out for, pieces of advice?
No, absolutely. I think the most underrated piece of advice given to startups is about how to manage their burn and
Mhm.
payroll costs. Payroll cost is your entire burn. And if you're not thinking about building a distributed team from day one, you will land in trouble sooner or later, because you cannot get away with hiring, $150,000 software engineers in United States just
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
You talk about a sales reps, success, accounting, there will always be a lot of functions. So you just have to think about global, think about hubs, so that you can extend your runway very, very nicely and well. I mean, it was just about 2 years ago, this company in the United States called Fast company. I think they kind of ran out of money simply because they had their annual payroll cost, did some rough math, was close to about 100 million, because they had about 800 to 900 staff just in the US alone. And I was thinking, okay, how many
yeah,
companies actually raise that kind of funds, right? And
right.
and 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 really, if you want to, if you want to live to tell the tale, you've got to live another day. So
That's
try
so
try
true,
your best,
so
try to
true.
best extend your runway. Think about global talent. Think about, there's you don't need everybody to be sitting next to you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, totally makes sense. I mean, 70% of our team is international because of that fact.
Yeah.
uh yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. A lot of really great like compacted thoughts and notes here. um Happy to circulate this back to you too afterwards, but thanks so much for taking the time.